Fleet Admiral Korthax of the Krillian Third Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship Devastator, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The human solar system appeared exactly as intelligence had predicted, a single inhabited world, with minimal defenses and a primitive space infrastructure. Range to target? He demanded, his forearms crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of Krillian command authority. 12 hours to optimal attack position, Fleet Admiral, reported his tactical officer. The humans appear to be attempting some kind of evacuation, but their ships are slow and poorly organized. Korthax's mandibles clicked with amusement. Of course they are. A species that required our guidance to leave their own planet could hardly mount an effective defense. He gestured toward the main display with one clawed hand. What resistance are our forward scouts detecting? Minimal, sir. Several orbital stations that appear to be communications or research facilities. A few dozen small ships that might be converted civilian vessels. Nothing that poses a threat to the fleet. The Fleet Admiral nodded approvingly. This would be even easier than the conquest of the Veltari system, where at least the defenders had possessed energy weapons. The humans seemed to be relying on chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons, technology that was centuries behind Krillian capabilities. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. They're requesting parley. Let them grovel, Korthax replied dismissively. Perhaps they've realized the futility of resistance. The main screen flickered to show a middle-aged human woman in what appeared to be a military uniform. Her expression was calm but resigned. I am Admiral Sarah Washington, commanding Earth's Defense Forces, the human said. I am authorized to discuss terms of surrender. Korthax allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. I am Fleet Admiral Korthax of the Third Fleet. Your surrender is acceptable, though it comes rather late. General Vextar has demanded appropriate punishment for your species' aggression. We understand, Washington replied. However, we have one final request before we formally surrender. Speak quickly, human. We request that you bring your entire fleet within the orbit of our moon before beginning the invasion. Our government wishes to inspect your ships before transferring authority. The request was so absurd that Korthax actually laughed. You wish to inspect Krillian warships? Your primitive sensors couldn't even comprehend our defensive systems. Nevertheless, it's our final request, Washington said calmly. Very well, Korthax decided magnanimously. The Third Fleet will honor this pathetic gesture. Perhaps seeing true warships up close will teach your species proper respect for their betters. The transmission ended and the bridge crew began plotting the fleet's final approach. Within 6 hours, 300 Krillian capital ships and 800 support vessels had taken position between Earth and its moon, their massive hulls blocking out stars as they prepared for what would be recorded as the shortest conquest in galactic history. Fleet in position, sir, the tactical officer reported. All ships reporting ready for final assault. The human orbital stations haven't even powered up defensive systems. Korthax was about to give the order to begin the attack when his sensor operator called out urgently. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system, multiple contacts appearing on long-range sensors. The main display shifted to show the broader solar system, and Korthax felt his confidence evaporate like atmosphere into vacuum. What had appeared to be empty space and innocent asteroids suddenly blazed with weapon signatures. Hundreds of hidden installations powered up simultaneously while previously undetected ships emerged from stealth positions. Where did they come from? Korthax demanded. Unknown, sir. They must have been using some kind of advanced stealth technology. I count over 400 weapons platforms and at least 200 warships. But that wasn't the worst of it. As the Krillian fleet hung motionless between Earth and its moon, massive structures began emerging from the lunar surface itself. What they had assumed was a natural satellite revealed itself to be an armored fortress, bristling with enough weapons to level a planet. Fleet Admiral, the communications officer called out in panic. The humans are transmitting again. Admiral, Washington's face reappeared on the screen, but her expression had changed completely. Gone was the resigned defeat, replaced by something that made Korthax's blood run cold. It was the look of a predator that had just trapped its prey. Fleet Admiral Korthax, she said pleasantly. Welcome to Earth's solar system. I'm afraid there's been a slight change in our surrender terms. What is the meaning of this? Korthax roared. You said you were surrendering. Actually, I said we were willing to discuss terms of surrender, Washington corrected. I never specified whose surrender we'd be discussing. The tactical display updated with horrifying clarity. The Krillian fleet was surrounded, not just outnumbered, but completely trapped in what could only be described as the most sophisticated kill zone in galactic history. You see, Admiral, Washington continued, humanity has a saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We've been monitoring galactic politics since first contact. We knew this day would come eventually. Korthax tried to maintain his composure, even as his tactical officers reported more bad news. You cannot hope to match Krillian military might. Our ships are superior to anything your primitive species could construct. Oh, I'm sure they are. Washington agreed amiably. Fortunately, we didn't rely solely on ship-to-ship combat. You see, we learned something important about warfare from studying galactic conflicts. Everyone focuses on building bigger, more powerful ships. But they forget about environmental advantages. What are you talking about? Washington smiled, and Korthax suddenly understood why Earth had produced such successful predators. You're currently positioned in the gravitational influence of two major bodies, Earth and its moon. Both of those bodies are now under our complete control. Your ships may be superior in open space, Admiral, but you're not in open space anymore. The implications hit Korthax like a physical blow. His fleet was trapped in a gravity well, surrounded by weapons platforms that had emerged from concealment, with no room to maneuver or retreat. It was the perfect ambush. Furthermore, Washington continued, I should mention that what you're seeing is only our defensive grid. Our actual fleet is still approaching. Impossible, Korthax whispered. Long-range sensors should be picking them up right about now. The sensor operator confirmed his worst fears. Sir, multiple fleets approaching from the outer system. I count over 1,000 ships, sir. They were hidden behind the gas giants. Washington's image leaned forward slightly. So, here are your actual surrender terms, Admiral. Power down your weapons, prepare to be boarded, and explain to your crews that they're now prisoners of war. Any ship that attempts to leave this position will be destroyed. Any ship that powers weapons will be destroyed. Any ship that does not comply immediately will be destroyed. Korthax's bridge had fallen silent except for the soft beeping of sensors, detecting targeting locks from hundreds of human weapons. Every ship in his fleet was painted by multiple targeting systems, trapped like insects in a web they hadn't even seen until it was too late. You have 60 seconds to begin compliance, Washington announced. After that, we start shooting. And Admiral? The next time someone offers to show you their capabilities up close, you might want to think twice about accepting. The transmission ended, leaving the Krillian fleet alone with the terrible realization that they had just flown into the most sophisticated trap in military history. Admiral Sarah Reaper. Washington received the quantum transmission from the diplomatic delegation while she was reviewing fleet readiness reports in her office aboard the Orbital Command, Station Guardian Prime. The message was brief, encrypted, and contained exactly what she had been expecting for the past 18 months. Well, that tears it, she muttered, closing the file and activating her personal communication array. All senior staff to the war room. Authorization Omega Black. This is not a drill. Within minutes, the most dangerous people in human space had assembled around the holographic display table. General Patricia Iron Chen of the Marine Corps, Admiral David Kraken Petrov of the submarine fleet, General Robert Thunder Johnson of the Air Force, and Director Marcus Ghost, Kim of Intelligence. Each carried the weight of decades of experience and the scars of humanity's endless conflicts. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Washington began, the diplomatic mission has failed spectacularly. The Krillian Empire has been authorized by the Galactic Council to take military action against Earth. Authorized by whom? General Chen asked, her scarred face showing no surprise. The Council voted unanimously in favor after our boy Rodriguez slapped a Krillian general and then basically dared them to invade us. The room fell silent for a moment. Then General Johnson started laughing, a deep rumbling sound that filled the chamber. That crazy bastard actually did it. We've been planning for this scenario since first contact, and he just handed us the perfect setup. Director Kim leaned forward, his fingers dancing across his personal display. Intelligence confirms the Krillian Third Fleet has departed their staging area at Nexus Prime. Estimated arrival time at Earth, 72 hours. Fleet composition matches our projections. 300 capital ships, roughly 800 support vessels, and approximately 2 million ground troops. Only 2 million? Admiral Petrov asked with mock disappointment. I was hoping for more of a challenge. Admiral Washington called up the holographic display, showing the inner solar system with various colored markers representing defensive positions. Execute Protocol Lazarus. I want every asset in position within 48 hours. Full stealth deployment. The display transformed, showing dozens of previously hidden installations throughout the solar system. Weapons platforms disguised as asteroids, missile batteries hidden in the rings of Saturn, and hunter-killer submarines stationed in the ice of Europa all came online. What had appeared to be a peaceful solar system with minimal defenses suddenly revealed itself as the most heavily fortified region of space in galactic history. General Johnson, how are our atmospheric defenses? Washington asked. All 72 orbital defense platforms are operational and fully loaded, Johnson replied. Each one carries enough firepower to level a continent. The Krillians won't make it to the surface. Don't be so sure, Director Kim interjected, pulling up intelligence files. Krillian doctrine emphasizes overwhelming first strikes followed by rapid ground deployment. They'll try to establish beachheads before we can fully respond. General Chen smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Let them try. We've been preparing for ground combat against superior alien forces for 5 years. Every city, every town, every farm has been fortified and armed. If they want Earth, they'll have to take it one bloody meter at a time. Admiral Washington nodded grimly. What about civilian evacuations? Already underway, Director Kim confirmed. Emergency protocols are in effect. Essential personnel are being moved to hardened shelters, while non-essential civilians are being relocated to the colony worlds. Though honestly, most of them are refusing to leave. Refusing? Washington asked with surprise. Turns out humans don't like being told their planet is about to be invaded, General Johnson explained. Volunteer militias are forming faster than we can process the applications. Half the civilian population is demanding weapons and training. Admiral Petrov brought up his section of the display, showing submarine deployments throughout Earth's oceans. The Krillians have never faced naval warfare in the traditional sense. Their homeworld is mostly dry land with small seas. They won't expect attacks to come from beneath ocean surfaces. Speaking of surprises, Director Kim said with a slight smile, our friends in R&D have been busy. Project Prometheus finally came online last week. The senior staff exchanged glances. Project Prometheus was humanity's most classified military development, known only to a handful of people across the entire species. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Admiral Washington asked. I'm saying that when the Krillians arrive, they're going to discover that humans have made some interesting technological advances since joining the galactic community, Kim replied cryptically. General Chen leaned back in her chair. You know, I almost feel sorry for them. They have no idea what they're walking into. Don't, Washington said firmly. They made their choice when they threatened genocide against human civilians. Rodriguez may have started this, but they escalated it to extinction-level warfare. The display updated with new information as reconnaissance satellites throughout the solar system came online. What had once appeared to be empty space now showed the true scope of humanity's defensive preparations. How long have we been building all this? Admiral Petrov asked, studying the massive network of hidden installations. Since about 6 months after first contact, Washington replied. The moment our analysts realized that galactic politics were dominated by military strength rather than diplomacy, we started preparing for the inevitable. Director Kim pulled up casualty projections and resource allocation charts. Conservative estimates suggest the Krillians will lose 60% of their fleet before reaching Earth orbit. If they attempt ground deployment, we expect 90% casualty rates within the first week. What about our losses? General Johnson asked. Minimal military casualties if everything goes according to plan, Kim replied. Civilian casualties depend on how quickly we can end this. Admiral Washington stood, her expression grim but determined. Gentlemen, lady, we're about to show the galaxy why humanity survived every extinction event our planet could throw at us. We didn't make it to the top of Earth's food chain by being nice. The meeting continued for another hour, as final preparations were reviewed and contingency plans activated. By the time the senior staff dispersed, the transformation of the solar system was nearly complete. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, weapons platforms powered up and began tracking the approaching Krillian fleet. On Earth's surface, mobile missile launchers emerged from camouflage positions while orbital railgun platforms extended from what had appeared to be communications satellites. In underground bunkers across every continent, quantum computers calculated firing solutions and coordinated defensive responses. The planet that had appeared helpless and primitive to Galactic, observers revealed its true nature as a fortress world whose inhabitants had spent 5 years preparing for exactly this moment. As Admiral Washington watched the tactical displays update in real time, she allowed herself a grim smile. "Rodriguez, you magnificent psychopath, you actually pulled it off." Somewhere in the command center, a technician looked up from his console. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the diplomatic ship. It's Commander Rodriguez. Put him through." Marcus's voice crackled through the communication array with typical calm confidence. "Guardian Prime, this is Serpent 6. Packages delivered, responses confirmed. The Krillians are bringing everything they've got." "Copy that, Serpent 6, Washington replied. "How long until the fireworks start?" "Estimate 60 hours until contact." "Admiral, they're not taking this seriously. They think this will be a simple conquest." "Then they're about to learn why humans don't make idle threats," Washington said. "Guardian Prime out." As the transmission ended, she turned to her staff. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to remind the galaxy why Earth produced the most successful predators in known biological history." The countdown to war had begun. The video call with Dr. Chen went better and worse than Marcus had feared. Better because the professor was genuinely excited about Emma's research and offered resources that could help refine her analysis. Worse because she immediately wanted to involve the Imperial Archaeological Commission. "Emma, your preliminary findings are extraordinary," Dr. Chen said, her image flickering slightly on their aging communication array. "But a discovery of this magnitude requires proper oversight. The Commission has protocols for exactly this type of situation." Marcus watched from just outside the camera's range as Emma navigated the conversation with impressive diplomacy. She shared enough information to maintain the professor's interest, while avoiding specific details about the extent of her findings. "I appreciate the guidance. Dr. Chen, could you give me a few days to compile my full data set before we bring in the Commission? I want to make sure my analysis is thorough." After the call ended, Emma turned to her father with the expression that mixed excitement with growing concern. "She's right about needing proper resources. But Dad, something about the way she talked about the Commission made me uncomfortable." Marcus had been thinking the same thing. Imperial bureaucrats didn't get excited about archaeological discoveries unless they saw potential military applications. The fact that Dr. Chen had immediately mentioned oversight suggested the Empire already had protocols for controlling dimensional manipulation technology. "What did your gut tell you about her?" Emma considered the question carefully. She seemed genuine about wanting to help me, but there was something else. When I mentioned the energy readings, her expression changed for just a second, like she recognized something specific. The tactical part of Marcus's mind began assembling threat assessments and contingency plans. If the Empire already knew about dimensional manipulation technology, then Emma's discovery wasn't just academically interesting. It was strategically vital. "Em, I need to tell you something about my military service. Some of it, anyway." For the next hour, Marcus shared carefully edited versions of missions that had brought him into contact with Imperial intelligence operations. He described how the Empire controlled information flow in the outer systems, how they eliminated threats to their technological advantages, and how civilians often disappeared when they stumbled across sensitive discoveries. Emma listened in growing horror as her father painted a picture of an organization that prioritized control over everything else, including human life. "Are you saying they would hurt people over this?" "I'm saying they've hurt people over much less." Emma was quiet for a long time, staring at her tablet where her research data scrolled past in endless streams of numbers and theoretical frameworks. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a determination that reminded Marcus powerfully of her mother. "Then, we have a responsibility to make sure this information reaches people who will use it to help instead of control. Marcus felt pride and terror in equal measure. Emma had inherited more than just Sarah's intelligence. She'd inherited her moral courage as well. It was exactly the trait that would get her killed if they weren't extremely careful. Over the next 3 days, they worked together to document Emma's discovery in exhaustive detail. Marcus's military training proved valuable for organizing information in ways that would be difficult to suppress or alter. They created multiple copies of everything, stored in different formats, with redundant backup systems. Emma's analysis had grown more sophisticated as she gained access to additional sensor readings from the mining equipment. The dimensional energy patterns weren't just present. They were actively fluctuating in response to external stimuli. When she'd placed a standard geological scanner near one of the larger crystal formations, the entire network had exhibited what could only be described as curiosity. "Dad, I think it's alive. Not biological, but definitely some form of intelligence." The implications sent chills down Marcus's spine. If Emma was right, then Kepler 442c wasn't just an archaeological site. It was a sentient entity, and they were living inside it. "Have you tried communicating with it?" "I've been working on that. Mathematical progressions, basic physics constants, prime numbers. There's definitely a response pattern, but I can't decode it yet." Marcus stared at the readouts showing energy fluctuations that occurred whenever Emma ran her experiments. The patterns were complex but not random. Something was definitely trying to communicate. "Emma, what do you think it wants?" "I think it's been waiting. The geological evidence suggests these formations have been dormant for thousands of years. But they activated around the same time the first human colonists arrived. Maybe it was waiting for someone with the right technological base to establish meaningful contact." The idea that an ancient alien intelligence had been waiting, specifically for humans, was both thrilling and terrifying. It suggested that humanity might have some unique quality that other galactic species lacked. It also meant that Emma's discovery could fundamentally alter humanity's position in the galaxy. The communication array in their habitat chimed with an incoming priority message. Marcus felt his blood freeze as he recognized the Imperial seal in the transmission header. "Emma, step away from your tablet. Now." The message was brief and politely worded, but its implications were unmistakable. Imperial Archaeological Commission representatives would be arriving on Kepler 442c within 48 hours to investigate reports of significant findings. Colony residents were instructed to preserve all potential archaeological sites and make relevant data available. For official review, Marcus's tactical mind immediately began, calculating escape routes and defensive positions. 48 hours was enough time to get Emma off planet if they moved fast. His old contacts in the Outer Rim could provide transport and safe houses, but running would mean abandoning the colony, and Emma's research and any chance of ensuring her discovery reached people who could use it responsibly. Emma was reading over his shoulder, her face pale but determined. "They're coming because of Dr. Chen, aren't they?" "Almost certainly. The question is whether she contacted them directly, or whether they were already monitoring academic communications for keywords related to dimensional technology. Either way, we're out of time." Emma pulled up her research files, her fingers flying across the tablet's interface. "Dad, I need to accelerate the communication attempt. If this intelligence has been waiting for contact, maybe it can help protect itself. And us." Marcus watched his 15-year-old daughter prepare to make first contact with an alien intelligence, while Imperial forces closed in on their position. The absurdity of the situation would have been funny if the stakes weren't so impossibly high. "What do you need from me?" "Help me get to the main crystal formation in Sector 7. I need direct physical contact to establish a stronger communication link." Marcus checked his weapon cache and started assembling equipment for what might be their last trip to the mining complex. If Emma was going to attempt first contact, he was going to make sure she had the best possible chance of success. As they prepared to leave their habitat, Emma paused to look around the small space that had been their home for the past 3 years. "Dad, if this goes wrong, it won't go wrong." Emma smiled at his certainty. "How can you be so sure?" Marcus checked his sidearm and activated the combat protocols that he'd hoped never to use again. "Because I've never failed to protect you yet, and I'm not starting now." Marcus Chen had built his life around two things: protecting his daughter and staying invisible. The former Navy SEAL had chosen the remote mining colony of Kepler 442c, specifically because it existed on the absolute edge of civilized space, where Galactic Empire patrols rarely bothered to venture. Here, among the red dust and crystalline formations that stretched beyond the horizon, he could raise Emma in peace. The colony housed maybe 300 souls, mostly human refugees and a handful of other species who preferred the quiet life. Marcus worked the deep mines during the day, his enhanced cybernetic arm making him invaluable for the heavy lifting that even the automated systems couldn't handle. His neighbors knew him as a quiet man who kept to himself, spoke little about his past, and would do anything for his 15-year-old daughter. Emma was everything good that remained in Marcus's world. Brilliant beyond her years, she had inherited her mother's quick wit and her father's stubborn determination. While other teenagers complained about the isolation, Emma thrived on it. She spent her days studying xenobiology through the colony's limited network access, teaching herself 6 different alien languages and helping Dr. Rodriguez in the small medical facility. The morning that changed everything started like any other. Marcus was suiting up for another shift in the deep tunnels when Emma burst into their small prefab home, her dark eyes shining with excitement. "Dad, you have to see this." She thrust her tablet toward him, displaying a complex molecular diagram. "I've been analyzing the crystal formations in Sector 7, and I think I've found something incredible. The lattice structure isn't naturally occurring. Someone built this." Marcus paused in checking his equipment harness. Emma's scientific discoveries had become a regular occurrence, each one more impressive than the last. The local university representatives who occasionally visited the colony had already tried twice to recruit her for advanced programs in the inner systems. "Built by who, sweetheart?" "That's just it. The geometric patterns match theoretical frameworks for dimensional manipulation technology. Dad, I think this entire planet might be some kind of ancient alien installation. Not just ruins, but something that's still active." The pride in Marcus's chest warred with a familiar protective instinct. Emma's intelligence was a gift, but it also made her stand out in ways that could prove dangerous. The Galactic Empire had strict protocols about archaeological discoveries, especially anything that might represent advanced technology. "Have you shared this with anyone else?" Emma shook her head. "I wanted to tell you first. But Dad, if I'm right, this could change everything. The applications for dimensional manipulation could solve the energy crisis in the outer colonies. It could help millions of people." Marcus studied his daughter's face, seeing so much of her mother in her passionate dedication to helping others. Sarah would have been proud of the young woman Emma was becoming. She also would have understood the danger better than anyone. "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't share this discovery with anyone yet. Give me some time to think about the best way forward." Her expression shifted to confusion, then mild frustration. "Dad, I know you worry about me, but this is important. People deserve to know." "I'm not questioning the importance, sweetheart. I'm questioning the timing. The Empire has very specific rules about archaeological discoveries. We need to be smart about this." Emma's tablet chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it and her face lit up again. "It's from Dr. Chen at the Kepler University. She's responding to my paper on crystalline geological formations. She wants to set up a video call tomorrow." The protective alarm in Marcus's mind grew louder. Academic recognition meant attention, and attention meant scrutiny. In his experience, when the Galactic Empire took interest in something, innocent people had a way of disappearing. "That's wonderful, Em. But let's talk about this more tonight, okay? I really do need to get to work." Emma nodded, though he could see she was already mentally preparing for her conversation with the university professor. As Marcus headed toward the mining complex, he made a mental note to contact his old handler through the encrypted channels he'd hoped never to use again. The day passed in routine mechanical work, but Marcus's mind kept returning to Emma's discovery. His daughter was right about the potential implications. Dimensional manipulation technology could revolutionize space travel, energy production, and countless other applications. It could also represent a strategic advantage that the Galactic Empire would kill to control. By the time Marcus returned home, Emma had disappeared into her research again. He could hear her through the thin walls of their habitat, speaking excitedly in what sounded like Zephyrian as she recorded notes. The dedication reminded him so much of Sarah that it physically hurt. That evening, over a simple dinner of protein rations and hydroponic vegetables, Emma shared more details about her discovery. She'd found evidence that the crystal formations extended deep underground, possibly throughout the entire planetary crust. More disturbing, her analysis suggested they were drawing energy from somewhere, maintaining their structural integrity across what might be thousands of years. "I've been thinking about what you said," Emma told him as they cleaned up, "about being careful with the Empire. I know you don't like talking about your military service, but I'm not naive. Dad, I understand that powerful people sometimes do terrible things to protect their interests." Marcus paused in loading the small dishwasher. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we should document everything thoroughly before we report it. Make sure the information gets to multiple sources simultaneously. Harder for anyone to suppress or control that way." The tactical thinking impressed him, even as it reinforced his concerns. Emma was smart enough to understand the political implications of her discovery, which meant she was also smart enough to get herself killed if they weren't extremely careful. "That's good thinking, sweetheart. Let's plan this out together, okay? No contact with outside parties until we have a strategy." Emma smiled and hugged him tightly. "I love you, Dad. I know you just want to keep me safe." As Marcus held his daughter, he stared out through their small window at the alien stars scattered across the night sky. Somewhere out there, the vast machinery of the Galactic Empire continued its work of maintaining order, through fear and control. He'd spent years believing that distance and anonymity would keep Emma safe from that reality. Now, with her brilliant mind on the verge of a discovery that could reshape the galaxy, Marcus realized that safety had always been an illusion. The only question was whether he could stay ahead of the consequences long enough to protect the most important thing in his universe. The next morning would bring Dr. Chen's video call, and with it the first step toward a future that Marcus couldn't control or predict. All he could do was prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Fleet Admiral Korthak stared at the countdown timer on his tactical display as precious seconds ticked away. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that could mean the difference between life and death for over 1 million Krillian military personnel. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "recommend immediate compliance. We're completely surrounded and outgunned." "Outgunned by humans?" Korthak snarled, though his voice lacked conviction. "These are primitive beings who barely mastered space travel." "With respect, sir," the sensor operator interjected, "the energy readings I'm detecting suggest their weapons technology is significantly more advanced than our intelligence indicated. Some of these signatures don't match any known galactic technology." Korthax's forearms trembled with rage and humiliation. To surrender without firing a shot would mean the end of his career, his honor, and possibly his life. But to resist might mean the destruction of the entire Third Fleet. 30 seconds, Admiral," the communications officer announced. "Sir," the tactical officer called out urgently, "the human ship Nemesis is powering up some kind of weapon array. Energy signatures are off the scale." On the main display, one of the human vessels began to glow with an eerie blue light that seemed to distort space around it. The effect was unlike anything in Krillian military databases. 15 seconds came the countdown. Korthax made his decision. "All ships power down weapon systems. Prepare for—" He never finished the sentence. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the Nemesis, and a beam of energy unlike anything in galactic history lanced across space to strike one of the asteroids in the belt beyond Mars. The result was instantaneous and terrifying. The asteroid, roughly the size of a Krillian dreadnought, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but literally converted to its component atoms in a fraction of a second. Where solid rock had floated moments before, only a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated gas remained. By the depths, someone whispered on the bridge. "What was that?" Admiral Washington's voice came through the communication array, calm and conversational. "That was our antimatter conversion beam. We call it a planet cracker, though it works just as well on ships. We thought you might like to see it in action before you made your decision." Korthax felt something cold settle in his stomach. Antimatter weapons existed in galactic military theory, but no species had ever developed practical applications. The energy requirements were considered impossible to achieve. "How?" he managed to ask. "Human ingenuity," Washington replied simply. "We've had 5 years to study galactic technology and improve upon it. Turns out when you give human scientists and engineers a challenge, they tend to find creative solutions." The tactical display updated with new information as more human weapons came online. Railguns that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Gravity manipulation devices that could create miniature black holes. Quantum entanglement bombs that could destroy targets at the subatomic level. This is impossible, Korthax breathed. No species develops this rapidly. No one makes these kinds of technological leaps in mere years. Admiral, Washington said, and there was something almost pitying in her tone. You made the same mistake that every species makes when they first encounter humanity. You assumed we were like you. What do you mean? You assumed that because we appeared technologically primitive, we were intellectually inferior. You failed to consider why a species might choose not to develop certain technologies. Korthax didn't understand. Choose not to develop weapons? We developed all of this. Washington gestured toward the display showing human defensive positions. On Earth. Over the past 5,000 years of recorded history. We just never built it because we didn't need to fight aliens. The implications hit him like an asteroid impact. You're saying, I'm saying that humans have been planning interstellar warfare since before we achieved spaceflight. We just didn't have targets until we joined the galactic community. Do you have any idea how many human generals have spent their entire careers dreaming about commanding fleets in space battles? Around the bridge, Krillian officers stared at their displays in growing horror. The human defensive grid wasn't just impressive. It was the product of centuries of military thinking applied to galactic-scale combat. Furthermore, Washington continued, you made another critical error. You assumed that because Earth had one government and one military, we were unified in our approach to defense. Are you not? Admiral, Earth has over 200 individual nations, each with their own military traditions and strategic doctrines. What you're facing isn't the military might of one world, it's the combined tactical knowledge of 8 billion humans who have spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. New voice joined the communication, speaking with a slight accent that the translators identified as Russian. This is Admiral Petrov of the submarine fleet. Allow me to demonstrate human naval doctrine. What happened next defied everything the Krillians thought they knew about space combat. 30 human vessels that had been invisible to sensors suddenly materialized throughout the Krillian formation. They had been there all along, somehow masked from detection while moving freely through the fleet. Stealth submarines, Petrov explained cheerfully. We adapted the concept for space warfare. Your sensors are configured to detect energy signatures in large masses. Our ships run silent and dark until they choose to reveal themselves. Each submarine had positioned itself adjacent to a Krillian capital ship, their weapons trained on critical systems. In a single coordinated movement, they could have crippled or destroyed the entire fleet. A third voice joined the communication, this one with what sounded like British inflection. General Morrison, Royal Air Force. Thought you might appreciate our interpretation of air superiority doctrine. High above the trapped fleet, space seemed to shimmer as hundreds of fighter craft dropped their stealth screens. They had been flying escort patterns around the Krillian ships for hours, invisible and undetected. Stealth fighters, Morrison explained. Each one carries enough firepower to take out a cruiser. We've been studying your formation, identifying weak points and calculating optimal attack patterns. Lovely ships, by the way. Excellent armor, but your point defense systems have some interesting blind spots. Korthax realized with growing horror that his fleet hadn't just flown into a trap. They had been studied, analyzed and dissected by human military minds that treated warfare as both science and art. This cannot be, he said weakly. You cannot have developed all of this in 5 years. Admiral Washington's image reappeared on the main screen. Admiral, let me share something that might help you understand humanity a little better. Do you know what we call a period of peace on Earth? No. Preparation time. Her smile was genuinely friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. So here's the situation. Your fleet is completely surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. Every ship is targeted by multiple weapon systems. You have no tactical advantages and no possibility of victory. Korthax looked around his bridge at officers who had moments before been confident in their superiority. Now they stared at their instruments with the dawning realization that they were facing a species that had turned warfare into an art form. However, Washington continued, we're not unreasonable people. We're prepared to accept your surrender and treat your crews according to galactic conventions. Your choice, Admiral. The Fleet Admiral of the Krillian Third Fleet, veteran of a dozen successful conquests, looked at the tactical display showing his trapped and helpless fleet. Then he looked at the countdown timer showing how long he had been given to decide. For the first time in his military career, surrender seemed like the intelligent option. The surrender of the Krillian Third Fleet took exactly 17 minutes to complete. Fleet Admiral Korthax transmitted the formal capitulation, while his tactical officers powered down weapon systems and prepared for boarding. Across the trapped formation, over 1,000 Krillian warships went dark, their crews waiting in stunned silence for human boarding parties. Admiral Washington watched the proceedings from Guardian Prime's command center, her expression showing no satisfaction in the victory. This had been necessary, but she took no pleasure in the defeat of an enemy who had walked so completely into their trap. "Admiral," Director Kim announced from his intelligence station, "we're receiving priority communications from 17 different galactic governments. They're all requesting immediate audience with Earth's leadership." "I'll bet they are," Washington replied dryly. "What about the Galactic Council?" "Chancellor Mordak is requesting an emergency session. He seems concerned about the implications of what just happened." Washington nodded. The political ramifications of this engagement would ripple across the galaxy for years to come. In less than an hour, humanity had demonstrated military capabilities that exceeded most galactic powers by orders of magnitude. "Ma'am," General Chen reported from the surface, "boarding operations are proceeding smoothly. The Krillians are cooperating fully. Most of them seem to be in shock." "Understood. Make sure our people follow Geneva Convention protocols. These prisoners are to be treated properly." "Copy that." "Admiral, you should know that several Krillian officers have requested personal meetings. They want to understand what just happened." Washington considered this. "Send them to the diplomatic facility on Luna. Arrange for full debriefings. I want to know everything about Krillian military doctrine and capabilities." "Already in progress." "Ma'am, we're also receiving requests from Krillian families. They want to know about their relatives in the fleet. Standard prisoner of war notifications. Full transparency about casualties and medical treatment." Washington paused. "How many casualties did we suffer?" "0 combat casualties," General Johnson reported from his Air Command Center. 3 minor injuries during boarding operations. The Krillians offered no resistance once surrender was declared. Washington felt a mixture of relief and unease. Such a decisive victory was almost too complete, too perfect. It would send exactly the message they wanted across the galaxy. But it might also create unexpected complications. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "incoming transmission from the diplomatic vessel. Commander Rodriguez is requesting permission to return to Earth." "Granted. Have him report directly to debriefing. I want a complete analysis of how the Krillians reacted to our ultimatum." 24 hours later, the political earthquake that Washington had predicted was in full swing. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council had been called as species across known space tried to understand the implications of humanity's military demonstration. Commander Rodriguez sat across from Washington in her private office, his expression calm despite having just initiated the largest shift in galactic politics in centuries. "So," Washington said, reviewing his report, "you deliberately provoked them into declaring war." "Yes, ma'am." The intelligence analysis was clear. The Krillians would eventually move against us regardless. Better to force the confrontation on our terms when we were fully prepared. "And you were confident we could handle their entire Third Fleet?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Admiral, I've seen what human military planning can accomplish when we're properly motivated. The moment they threatened Earth, their fate was sealed." Washington leaned back in her chair. "The political fallout is going to be significant. Half the galaxy is terrified of us now, and the other half wants to become our allies." "That was always going to happen eventually," Rodriguez replied. "Humans don't do anything halfway. Once we committed to galactic politics, we were always going to end up as either a major power or extinct." A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Washington accepted the transmission, and Chancellor Mordak's image appeared on her desk display. "Admiral Washington," the elderly Zephyrian said, his compound eyes reflecting exhaustion, "the Council has completed its emergency deliberations regarding recent events, Chancellor. The Council wishes to formally acknowledge that Earth's military response was entirely proportional to the threat posed by the Krillian Empire. We also wish to Apologize for not recognizing the gravity of General Vextar's threat. Washington nodded diplomatically. The Council's position is understood and appreciated. Furthermore, Mordak continued, the Council would like to discuss Earth's potential role in galactic security matters. It appears we may have been underutilizing human capabilities. We're open to discussions, Washington replied carefully. There is one other matter, Mordak said, his voice becoming even more formal. The Krillian Empire has requested mediation regarding the return of their third fleet. They claim the engagement was based on a misunderstanding. Rodriguez leaned forward. With respect, Chancellor, there was no misunderstanding. General Vextar explicitly threatened to reduce Earth to ash and vapor. Ambassador Krelthor confirmed this represented Empire policy. They declared war. We responded accordingly. Nevertheless, they are requesting negotiations for the return of their personnel and ships. Washington exchanged glances with Rodriguez. What are they offering? Complete reparations for the diplomatic incident, formal apology to Earth and its representatives, and a non-aggression pact with humanity. Not nearly enough, Rodriguez said immediately. They threatened genocide against 8 billion civilians. That requires more than an apology. Washington considered the political implications. What does the Council recommend? The Council suggests a formal hearing where both sides can present their positions. However, given the disparity in military outcomes, we believe Earth holds considerable leverage in any negotiations. After the transmission ended, Washington turned to Rodriguez. Your assessment? They're scared, he said bluntly. The Krillians just lost their most powerful fleet without inflicting a single casualty on us. Every species in the galaxy is recalculating their position relative to humanity. And what do you think we should demand in return for their fleet? Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. I think we should demand something that ensures this never happens again. Meaning? Meaning that humanity takes a formal role in galactic security. Not as enforcers, but as guarantors that strong species can't threaten weak ones with extinction. Washington studied him carefully. You're talking about fundamentally reshaping galactic politics. Ma'am, we already did that the moment we demonstrated what human military doctrine looks like when applied to galactic warfare. Now we need to decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. Outside Guardian Prime's viewing ports, the captured Krillian fleet hung motionless under human guard. In the distance, Earth continued its rotation, peaceful and blue and utterly unchanged by the fact that it had just become the most powerful single force in galactic politics. Schedule the negotiations, Washington decided. But make it clear that Earth's terms are non-negotiable. They wanted to see what humans are capable of in warfare. Now they get to learn what we're capable of in peace. Rodriguez smiled. Yes, ma'am. I think they're going to find that almost as educational. 3 months after the incident that galactic historians would later call the 5-Minute War, the Galactic Council convened in the largest assembly hall ever constructed. Representatives from every known species filled the vast amphitheater as Chancellor Mordak called the historic session to order. The negotiations had taken weeks, but the final agreement represented the most comprehensive change to galactic governance in recorded history. As Admiral Washington took her place at the new human delegation's expanded section, she reflected on how dramatically the balance of power had shifted. Honored delegates, Chancellor Mordak announced, we gather today to formally ratify the Earth Accords, which will establish new protocols for galactic security and conflict resolution. In the Krillian section, a much-reduced delegation sat with barely concealed humiliation. General Vextar was notably absent, having been quietly retired after the diplomatic disaster. Fleet Admiral Korthak sat in civilian robes. His military career ended, but his life spared through the negotiations. Ambassador Chen, now promoted to Earth's chief diplomatic representative, rose to address the assembly. The Earth Accords established 3 fundamental principles for galactic civilization. First, no species may threaten another with extinction-level military action. Second, conflicts between species must be resolved through mediation before military force is considered. Third, any species that violates these principles will face immediate intervention by the Galactic Security Force. And this security force? Asked the Luxari representative, their crystalline form chiming nervously. Will be commanded by humans? Jointly commanded, Chen corrected. Earth will provide strategic leadership and advanced military technology, while other species contribute specialized capabilities and personnel. No single species will have unilateral control. This had been the key compromise that made the Accords possible. Humanity's overwhelming military demonstration had terrified much of the galaxy, but their proposal for shared security governance had reassured nervous species that Earth wasn't seeking galactic domination. The Nathani delegate floated forward in their environmental suit. What guarantees do we have that human military technology won't be used for conquest rather than peacekeeping? Commander Rodriguez, now wearing the insignia of Earth's first galactic security coordinator, stood to answer. Complete transparency. All human military installations will be open to inspection by Council representatives. All security operations will require approval from a mixed-species command structure, and most importantly, Earth's military doctrine has always focused on defensive rather than offensive capabilities. Defensive, the Krillian representative challenged. Your weapons can destroy planets. Our weapons can defend planets, Rodriguez corrected calmly. There's a difference. Earth has no interest in conquest or empire building. We prefer to be left alone to develop in peace. However, we also refuse to allow others to threaten peaceful species with extinction. Chancellor Mordak called for the formal vote on the Earth Accords. One by one, species representatives registered their positions. The result was overwhelming. Unanimous approval, with only the Krillian Empire abstaining. As the session concluded, Admiral Washington found herself approached by delegates from dozens of species, each eager to discuss military cooperation agreements and technology-sharing partnerships. The transformation from galactic newcomer to dominant power had happened so quickly that she sometimes felt dizzy thinking about it. Admiral, a voice called behind her. She turned to see Fleet Admiral Korthax approaching, his expression humble but determined. Admiral Korthax, she acknowledged politely. I wanted to express my gratitude for the treatment of my crews during their captivity, he said formally. Your people showed honor and restraint that was unexpected. Washington nodded. Human military doctrine includes strict rules about prisoner treatment. We don't punish soldiers for following orders, even bad orders. May I ask you something? Korthax hesitated. How long did you plan for this confrontation? Since about 6 months after first contact, Washington replied honestly. Our analysts realized that galactic politics were dominated by military strength rather than diplomacy. We decided we'd better be ready. And the weapons? The defensive grid? The stealth technology? Developments of existing human technology adapted for space warfare. We've been building weapons of mass destruction for centuries, Admiral. We just never had targets in other star systems before. Korthax was quiet for a long moment. I underestimated your species badly. Everyone did, Washington agreed. That was the point. Better to be underestimated and prepared than overestimated and vulnerable. What happens now? To my people, I mean. Washington considered her answer carefully. That depends on what your people want to happen. The Krillian Empire can remain isolated and resentful, or it can adapt to the new galactic order. Earth has no interest in destroying your civilization, but we won't tolerate threats against peaceful species. And if we choose cooperation, then you'll find humans to be valuable allies. We don't hold grudges if you don't give us reasons to. Your military experience and tactical knowledge would be welcome additions to the security force. Korthax looked surprised. You would trust us with positions in your security organization? We'd trust competent officers who understand the consequences of threatening peaceful populations, Washington corrected. The Empire's mistake was assuming that might makes right, but might in service of protection? That's something humans can respect. As they spoke, Commander Rodriguez approached with a data pad containing preliminary reports from the new security installations being constructed throughout the galaxy. The scope of the changes was staggering. How's the infrastructure development progressing? Washington asked. Ahead of schedule, Rodriguez replied. 17 species have requested security partnerships. The Zephyrians want help defending their outer colonies. The Luxari are asking for protection from raiders. And surprisingly, 3 former Krillian client species have requested independence guarantees. And our fleet construction? The shipyards at Saturn are producing new vessels faster than we can train crews for them. Every major spacefaring species wants to contribute personnel to the joint security forces. Admiral Washington looked around the departing council chamber, watching as delegates from across the galaxy discussed the implications of humanity's rise to galactic prominence. It was a responsibility she had never wanted but couldn't avoid. "Admiral Corthax," she said finally, "I'm going to make you an offer. The Galactic Security Force needs experienced fleet commanders who understand both tactical operations and the political implications of military action. Interested?" The former Krillian admiral stared at her in shock. "You would trust me with such a position?" "I'd trust an officer who learned from his mistakes and understands the new reality," Washington replied. "The question is whether you can accept serving in a military organization dedicated to protecting rather than conquering." Corthax considered this for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Admiral Washington, it would be an honor to serve under human command." "Not under human command," Washington corrected with a slight smile. "Under joint command, for the protection of all galactic civilization. That's the difference between the old order and the new one." As the Great Council chamber emptied, Admiral Washington stood with Commander Rodriguez and their former enemy, planning the defense of a galaxy that had discovered the hard way why Earth had produced such successful predators. But they had also discovered something else, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their tactics, but their ability to turn enemies into allies and transform conquest into protection. The age of galactic empire had ended. The age of galactic security had begun, and at its heart stood a species that had learned to channel their warrior nature into something greater than warfare, the protection of those who could not protect themselves. The galaxy would never be the same. Neither would humanity. And that, Admiral Washington reflected as she watched Earth rise over the lunar horizon, was exactly the point.